My name is Kreth of the Night Lords, 8th Legion, 3rd Claw. I have been a servant of the Long War for 47 years. I have broken sieges, razed cities, and done things to civilian populations that I will not enumerate in this testimony because the enumeration is not the point and because some of the things I have done are, I have been told, genuinely difficult for non-chaos aligned minds to process without lasting damage. I am a Night Lord. I was made to be a weapon of terror. I was made to be the thing that comes in the darkness and does not leave anything behind that can be called hope. I have been extremely good at this work for 47 years, and then something went wrong. Not in the way that things go wrong for other Chaos Warriors, not the catastrophic corruption of a champion who swears the wrong oath, not the slow dissolution of a Marine who loses himself to the warp. Something went wrong in the opposite direction. Something in me, after 47 years of being exactly what I was made to be, encountered one specific person in one specific circumstance and made one specific decision that I did not authorize and cannot fully explain. I kept her alive. I am going to tell you why that matters, why it matters so much that I am standing in front of an inquisitorial tribunal that has never, in its recorded history, taken testimony from a Night Lord's Chaos Space Marine who presented himself voluntarily. Voluntarily. I came here voluntarily. You may take a moment with that. Note. I am going to tell you what broke in me on Vantris Station. I am going to tell you what I found myself doing, not once, not accidentally, but repeatedly, compulsively. Over a period of 7 months, that my warband noticed and my Warmaster noticed and that resulted in my standing in front of this very unusual tribunal. I am going to tell you about a void-born technician named Maren Soth, who was 17 years old and who should have been exactly the kind of person a Night Lord treats as prey. And I am going to tell you why, instead, I kept her alive, not as leverage, not as a tool. I kept her alive because something in me, something the Long War and the Chaos Gods and 47 years of service to the 8th Legion had not been able to finish removing, decided, without consulting me, that her death was not acceptable. And I have been trying to understand that decision ever since. Let me tell you what a Night Lord does, because I think the tribunal needs to understand the craft before it can understand the malfunction. The 8th Legion does not kill for pleasure. I want to be precise about this because the common misunderstanding that we are simple sadists undersells what Conrad Kurz built. We are students of fear. We study the psychology of prey the way a medic studies disease, comprehensively, rigorously, with genuine intellectual investment in understanding what we are working with. We know which sounds break the human mind most efficiently. We know how long isolation takes to produce dissociation. We know the specific point at which hope becomes more dangerous than despair and how to manipulate the transition. We are, in the specific technical sense, the most psychologically sophisticated warriors in the galaxy. This sophistication is not cruelty, it is craft. And I was, before Vantris Station, an extremely competent craftsman. Vantris Station was a routine operation, void installation, civilian staff, no military presence worth noting. My claw took it in 11 minutes, standard Night Lord's methodology. Systematic darkness, systematic separation, systematic escalation until the psychological collapse is complete. I had executed this methodology 42 times in 7 years. On the 43rd execution, in a maintenance corridor on the station's secondary level, I found Maren Soth. She was 17 years old. She was in a maintenance coverall 3 sizes too large. She was alone. And when she heard me coming through the darkness and she saw me materialize from it, she did something that stopped every calculation I had running simultaneously. I remember vividly, she said, "You are going to kill me." It was not a question. It was not a plea. It was a statement delivered in the specific flat tone of someone who has already run the calculation and arrived at the conclusion. And I stood there, 47 years of absolute operational certainty, a Night Lord at the peak of his craft, every psychological tool in my considerable arsenal available to me, and I did not kill her. Not because I had decided not to, because I found that I could not immediately form the decision. The specific quality of her certainty stopped something in me the way a load-bearing stone stops a collapse. I had been told, in my training, that humans in extremity become unpredictable. I had never been told they could be so precisely correct about their own situation that the correctness itself became a form of disruption. She was right. I was going to kill her. And then, For the first time in 47 years, I was not. She said, "You are going to kill me." And then she said something that no prey has said to me in 47 years of hunting. She said, "Before you do, can you tell me if this corridor is load-bearing? I want to know if I have time to reach the secondary junction before the upper section comes down." She was not asking me to spare her. She was not bargaining. She was solving a structural engineering problem in the middle of a Night Lord's raid on a void station that was collapsing around her. The psychological profile of a human in extremity. I had studied this comprehensively. It was one of my primary analytical tools, did not include this response. Nowhere in 47 years of observing human behavior under maximum stress had I encountered someone who responded to imminent death by doing engineering calculations. It disrupted something. I am being deliberately technical about this because I want the Tribunal to understand that what happened was not a decision. It was a disruption. The specific certainty of her question, the complete absence of performance in it, no pleading, no bargaining, no denial, disrupted the decision formation process in a way I cannot fully account for even now, 7 months later. I stood in that corridor for what my internal chronometer registered as 11 seconds. 11 seconds is an extremely long time for a Night Lord in an active operational theater. In 11 seconds I processed 47 years of training, the specific psychological profile of the person in front of me, the operational requirements of the mission, and one other thing that I had not expected to process and that I cannot, even now, name precisely. At the end of 11 seconds I told her the corridor was load-bearing. I told her the corridor was load-bearing. I do not know why I told her. The information was not useful to me. It was useful to her. She immediately moved to the secondary structural junction, which was the correct position to survive the collapse if it came. She was using the information I had given her. A Night Lord had given information to Prey, and Prey was using it to survive. And I was watching this happen as though it were a sequence of events I was observing rather than participating in. And then my claw brother Vestas found me in the corridor and asked why the technician was still alive. I told him she was leverage. It was the first lie I had told a brother in 47 years of service. And I knew when I said it that it was not the last. She stayed alive because I told Vestas she was leverage. That justification lasted 9 days, until it became clear that I was not using her as leverage in any operational sense. I then transitioned to, she is an intelligence asset, she knows the station's systems. That lasted 3 weeks, until we had extracted all relevant intelligence and the standard protocol was execution. I then found other reasons. Her knowledge of the Void Station's secondary network, legitimate, for approximately 2 more weeks. Then I told my claw that she had medical training and had identified a compromised seal on my armor that would have failed in vacuum. True, she had in fact identified it, which is why I had allowed her near enough to identify it, which I could not explain. Then I told them she had spotted an Imperial monitoring beacon that we would have triggered without her knowledge of the station's sensor layout, also true, because I had started asking her questions about the station's sensor layout. By the 5th month, Vestas told me that the tactical justifications were beginning to repeat with variation rather than introducing new elements. He said this with the specific tone of a Night Lord who is trying to determine whether his claw brother has been corrupted by the warp or by something worse. I told him it was not warp corruption. He asked me what it was. I told him I was still working that out. It was the most honest thing I had said in 7 months. Note this, for I will ask you later. Warmaster Dreveth summoned me after the 7th month. He said, "Brother Kreth, your tactical justifications for the technician are becoming elaborate." I said, "She is a significant operational resource." He said, "You repaired her broken hand." I said, "She cannot operate systems with a broken hand." He said, "We do not have systems that require her specifically." And I said, and this is the moment I knew something had genuinely gone wrong, because a Night Lord does not say this. I said, "She is not leverage. She is not intelligence. She is not a resource. She is a person." Warmaster Dreveth looked at me for a very long time. Then he said, "I am going to pretend I did not hear that, and you are going to explain to me what has happened to you." Maren Soth was Voidborn. This is relevant because void-born humans develop differently from their planetary counterparts, lower gravity, different social structures, a specific relationship to enclosed space that is the inverse of claustrophobia. They are comfortable in darkness in a way that planetary humans are not, which meant that the primary psychological tool of the Night Lords, the darkness itself, was significantly less effective on her than on standard prey. I had noted this in my initial assessment as a tactical complication. I came to understand it later as something else. She had been on Vantris Station since she was 4 years old, which is approximately the age of first memory for baseline humans, which meant that the station was not where she lived. The station was what she was. She knew its systems the way I know my bolter, not because she had learned them, but because they were the medium through which she experienced existence. She had taught herself structural engineering from the station's technical library because the station's structure was her primary concern and because she was, I determined across 7 months of involuntary observation, constitutionally incapable of not understanding things. She could not encounter a system she did not understand without attempting to understand it. In the 4th month, she began attempting to understand me, and I let her. Because the specific quality of her curiosity, precise, non-performative, without fear or agenda, was, I discovered, the only thing in 47 years of existence that had made me feel something I could identify as something other than tactical certainty. She made me feel observed, not hunted. Observed, by someone who was genuinely trying to understand what she was seeing. Note this down. She asked me once, this was in the 4th month, after she had stopped flinching when I moved suddenly, she asked me, do you actually enjoy it? The terror, the killing, or is it just what you do? I had been asked versions of that question by inquisitors under very different circumstances, and the answer I gave them was designed to maximize psychological impact. The answer I gave Maren Soth was different. I said, I enjoy the precision of it. I enjoy knowing exactly what will happen next and making it happen. She considered this for a long time. Then she said, that is not enjoying the terror. That is enjoying the control. And I said, yes. And she said, so do I. She was describing her engineering work. She was describing the satisfaction of knowing exactly how a system will behave and making it behave that way. We were describing the same quality in 2 entirely different contexts. And that specific recognition is what I have not been able to stop thinking about since the 1st month. She was not incomprehensible to me, she was recognizable. And I had no framework for that. The other warband arrived in the 5th month. Night Lords do not have formal territorial agreements. We have strength assessments and tactical calculations and the specific etiquette of predators who recognize each other as such. The arriving warband's assessment of Vantris Station included Maren Soth, who they found in the engineering bay where she spent most of her operational time. I was in the primary monitoring hub when Vestas contacted me on the box to inform me that the newcomers had found the technician and were treating her as available prey, which was the technically correct assessment of her status, which was the assessment I had been constructing elaborate justifications to prevent for 5 months. I was in the engineering bay in 43 seconds. I want to be precise about this because 43 seconds is, for a Night Lord in full operational mode, a significant response time. Significant in the sense that it represents prioritization. I had deprioritized everything else in the station in those 43 seconds and I had been moving at combat speed. I found tonight Lords of the arriving warband with Maren Soth. I removed them. I want to be clinical about the description because the Tribunal will want operational specifics and because being clinical about it is the only way I can describe it without the description becoming something I cannot continue past. What matters operationally is this. I killed 2 Night Lords, my own kind, not enemies, Night Lords, to prevent them from harming a void-born technician who was, by every operational metric I had constructed, an asset I had no sanctioned reason to protect with lethal force. I did it in 4 seconds. It was the fastest 4 seconds of my career. She looked at me for a long time after Vestas and the others left. Then she said, why? I said, operational asset. She said, Kreth. I had given her permission to use my name in the 3rd month, for reasons I had told myself were tactical and which were not. She said, Kreth, why? And I said, and this is the moment I understood that the malfunction was permanent. that whatever had broken in me on the first night in the maintenance corridor was not going to repair itself, I said, because they were going to hurt you. And she said, I know. Why did that matter? And I could not answer, because the answer was the thing I had spent 7 months refusing to look at directly. The answer was that it mattered because she mattered. Not as intelligence, not as leverage, not as operational asset. She mattered the way, and I understood this with the specific horror of a Night Lord who has studied the psychology of human attachment for 47 years and is now experiencing it from the inside. She mattered the way people matter to the humans I have spent my career terrorizing. She mattered the way I mattered to the Imperial Fist, the way the children mattered to the Salamander. And I am a Night Lord, and I did not know what to do with that. Warmaster Dreveth's interrogation lasted 3 hours. I will summarize the core of it because the full 3 hours involves a significant amount of repetition as Dreveth attempted to locate the operational framework within which my behavior made sense and repeatedly failed to find it. He asked me, was the technician a warp entity in disguise? No. Was she a psyker exerting influence? No. Was I corrupted by a specific chaos patron whose influence I was not disclosing? No. Was this a long-term strategic plan involving the technician that I had not briefed the warband on? No, and by this point Dreveth had become very quiet, which in a Night Lord's Warmaster is the equivalent of extremely agitated. He said, Kreth, explain to me in tactical terms what has occurred. I said, I cannot explain it in tactical terms. He said, then explain it in whatever terms are available. I said, I encountered a person who was not comprehensible to me as prey. She was comprehensible to me as, and I could not complete the sentence, because the word that came was the word I had been avoiding for 7 months. He waited, I said, as a person, he said. You have encountered persons for 47 years. I said, not like this, he said. Describe the difference. I said, she is not afraid of me, he said. Many people are not afraid of us before they understand what we are. I said, she understands exactly what I am. She has understood for 7 months. And she has never been afraid. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, that is, I agreed, unprecedented. Warmaster Dreveth said, I am going to ask the technician a question. I said, that is not standard Night Lord's protocol. He said, no. He went to the engineering bay. He returned 12 minutes later, he said. She says you should let her go. I said, that is not operationally viable. She knows our location and our strength. He said, she says she knows. She says she is asking you to let her go anyway. She says she will not report the station's location. She says, and this is what she said, Kreth, word for word, she says, tell him I understand what he is. And I am asking him to let me go because I think he understands what I am. And I think that matters more than the operational calculation. I stood there for a very long time. Then I said, she is right. And Dreveth said, I know. And he said, I am sending you to an inquisitorial tribunal. Not because you are compromised. Because this is genuinely outside my operational expertise and I think it should be on the record. She told me, in the 6th month, why she had not been afraid. I had been studying this question for 6 months because it was operationally significant. A human who is not afraid of a Night Lord is not standard, and because I had begun, in ways I was still not acknowledging, to find the answer interesting for reasons that were not operational. She said, I was afraid for approximately the first week, she said. Then I stopped being afraid because I noticed something. I said, what did you notice? She said. You are curious. Night Lords study their prey. I had told her this in an early conversation, explaining the methodology. She said, you are curious about everything. You are curious about the station. You are curious about how things work. You are curious about me. She said, you cannot be genuinely curious about something you have completely dehumanized. Genuine curiosity requires the assumption that the thing you are curious about has an interior, a depth you have not yet accessed. She said, the night you told me the corridor was load-bearing, you were curious about what I would do with the information. And I thought, he still thinks I am a person. And then she said something that I have thought about every day since the 6th month. She said, I think you have always thought everyone is a person. I think that is what makes you so good at the terror. You know exactly what you are destroying when you destroy it. I had never considered this interpretation of my own methodology. I had considered it for approximately 4 minutes before I understood that it was correct. And that understanding changed something in me that I am still, 7 months later, working out how to live with. Note this for later on, she said. The reason Night Lords are effective is not the darkness or the noise or the physical threat. It is that you make people feel that they are not seen. That they are prey categories, not individuals. That their specific reality does not matter to you. She said, when you stopped seeing me as prey, you became someone I could talk to. You became someone I could be curious about. You became, in the specific way that matters, a person. And the reason that is significant, the reason I am telling you this instead of just asking to be released, is that I think you have always been one. I think 47 years of the Night Lords being the thing in the darkness did not remove that. I think it just prevented you from noticing. I had been a Night Lord for 47 years. I had been a weapon of psychological destruction for 47 years. And a 17-year-old Voidborn technician who I had found in a maintenance corridor on a raid had looked at me with the specific precision of someone who cannot stop understanding things, and had found a person. And I did not know what to do with that except to be here, in this room, telling it to you, on the record. Because she deserves to be on the record, and so does what she found. I want to be precise about what I am asking this tribunal for, because precision is the only currency I have that has any value here, and I want to spend it correctly. I am not asking for clemency. My operational record is what it is, and I am not presenting mitigating circumstances for it. The things I have done are not mitigated by one person I chose not to harm, and I am not asking the tribunal to construct a ledger. I am not defecting. I am a Night Lord, and I will remain a Night Lord, and the specific circumstances of my service will continue in the form they have taken, and I am not offering operational intelligence in exchange for anything, because that is not the transaction I am here to make. What I am asking for is specific and small, and the only thing I care about in this proceeding. I am asking the tribunal to suppress Maren Soth's location from inquisitorial records that are accessible to Night Lords' intelligence networks for a period of 2 standard years, which is the estimated time required for her to establish a new operational base at a location that I have already identified as suitable, which I will provide to the tribunal in a sealed addendum, which they are not required to act on, but which represents the best available analysis of her optimal relocation options. I spent 3 weeks planning her extraction route before I came here. I needed to ensure she was moving before I arrived, because my arrival here will eventually become known to my warband through the intelligence channels that flow between Chaos and Imperial operations, and when it does, they will attempt to locate her. She needs to be somewhere they cannot easily find before that happens. That is why I came. That is all. Note, the Inquisitor said, you arranged for her extraction before coming here. I said, yes, she said. You knew that if you came here first and we detained you, the Warband's intelligence network would eventually locate her. I said, yes, she said. So you ensured her safety before your own. I said, her safety was the operational priority. The Inquisitor looked at me for a long time. Then she said something I had not expected. She said, Kreth of the Night Lords, I have been conducting inquisitorial proceedings for 22 years. I have never once heard a Chaos Space Marine describe a human being as an operational priority. She said, the protection you are asking for, the location suppression, I will arrange it. And then she said, I have one question for you. Not for the record. For me, she said. Do you know what has happened to you? And I said, I think I have remembered something I was supposed to have forgotten. And she said, yes, I think that is exactly right. The Inquisitor arranged the location suppression. Maren Soth is, as of my last confirmed intelligence, 7 days ago, before I came here, at a civilian transit hub in the Vantris system, which is not on any Night Lord's operational map and which I have taken additional steps to ensure remains absent from same. She does not know I arranged this. She asked me, on the last day before I sent her to the extraction point, whether she would see me again. I told her it was operationally inadvisable. She said, I know. I am asking anyway. I told her, probably not. She said, I think you are going to be alright. She said this to a Night Lord's Chaos Space Marine who had just arranged her extraction from a Chaos-held void station by spending 3 weeks mapping Imperial shipping lanes, which is not an activity that appears in any Night Lord's strategic doctrine. She said, I think you are going to be alright, and I said, I do not know what that means for something like me. And she said, it means you already know the difference between a person and prey. You have always known. You just had to find someone who was not afraid to show you that you knew. I am still a Night Lord. I want to be absolutely clear about that. The things I have done and will do are not altered by 7 months on Vantris Station and one specific person who refused to be afraid of me. I am a weapon of terror and I remain a weapon of terror, and the Inquisitor who processed this testimony was very clear that my operational status has not changed and that if we encounter each other in the field the standard protocols apply. I understand. I am still a Night Lord. I am also, permanently and irreversibly, someone who knows that the Void-born technician in the Korvath system is safe, and that her safety was worth coming to this room to ensure, and that the specific certainty of that, the specific weight of knowing one person is not in danger because of something I chose to do, is unlike anything 47 years of operational precision has produced in me. I do not have a Night Lord's name for it. I know what the humans in this room would call it. I am not going to say it, but it holds. The way good fortifications hold, the way names in the record hold. The way a girl stopping halfway between her father and a space marine and looking back holds. It holds. Maren Soth is safe. Kreth is still a Night Lord. And somewhere in the Korvath system, a Void-born technician who refused to be afraid is starting over. If you have watched this series from the beginning, if you have been with the Guardsman and the Chaplain and the Salamander and the Navigator and the Imperial Fist and all the rest, you already know what Kreth could not say at the end. Like, share, comment, and do not forget to subscribe. Because there are more confessions coming. More things the Imperium and Chaos and the galaxy itself was not built to hear. And in the comments, tell me which one of these 12 voices you are still carrying. Because I think you are all carrying one. I think that is why you are still here.